You wake at 3 in the morning, heart slamming against your ribs, gasping for air that's already there. The dream wasn't about water, but you were drowning. Drowning in something that has no name, no form, only weight. A pressure that fills every space inside you until there's no room left for yourself. You reach for your phone, scroll through messages from people who need you, and the exhaustion hits somewhere deeper than your body has words for. This is not insomnia. This is your unconscious screaming in the only language it has left. 5 nightmares visit empaths with a statistical consistency that defies coincidence. Not occasionally, not during periods of unusual stress. The same specific nightmares cycling through the empath's sleep with the regularity of a metronome, often multiple times per week, sometimes multiple times in a single night. You've learned to function on fractured rest, waking from scenarios that leave you more depleted than when you closed your eyes. But here's what no one tells you. These are not random. Carl Jung documented something far more dangerous happening inside the empath's psyche, something modern psychology has systematically refused to address. Your nervous system never stops working. It registers emotional frequencies others cannot detect, the anxiety in a room before anyone speaks, the hostility folded beneath polite conversation, the depression someone carries but never names. This is not mysticism. This is differentiated perception developed through survival necessity, now running without an off switch. The question that should haunt you, the one you haven't dared ask directly, is why the same ones? Why not infinite variations? Why do thousands of empaths who have never met, never compared notes, never even heard the word shadow work, report the same specific scenarios cycling through their sleep with eerie precision? The comfortable answers won't help you here. Therapists offer sleep hygiene, self-care, better boundaries, journaling before bed, reduced caffeine, and none of it works because the nightmares are not symptoms of poor habits. They are dispatches from a psyche in emergency. Jung and Freud, despite everything that divided them, agreed on one thing. Dreams are not noise. They are the unconscious speaking in the only language it has. And what your unconscious is saying in these specific dreams is that you are running out of time. Let's begin where it always begins. The first nightmare, drowning. It starts with water, or something like water, something that rises. You can't see the surface, you can't find the floor. You are suspended in a medium that fills your lungs before you realize you're inhaling it. And no matter how hard you kick, how hard you reach, you go nowhere except deeper. You wake up, you're breathing fine, but the sensation doesn't leave. Freud identified chronic drowning dreams as evidence of profound repressed rage, specifically rage about your own emotional neglect. While you were busy absorbing everyone else's feelings, who was attending to yours? The water isn't water. It's decades of accumulated emotional material you ingested without ever asking the question you should have asked first. Is this mine? Jung's interpretation cuts architecturally deeper. He called it psychic flooding, the collapse of ego boundaries in someone who has made emotional porosity their entire identity. In his private case notes from 1913, Jung documented an empath who woke gasping from drowning dreams with such regularity she feared going to sleep. Through analysis, Jung discovered she wasn't drowning in emotion at all. She was drowning in her own unlived life. Every absorbed feeling had displaced a piece of her own psychological development. Her psyche's message was stark. Differentiate or dissolve. Those were the only options remaining. Several of Jung's patients who ignored this dream never recovered. You might think the drowning is the worst of it. A warning, perhaps. An uncomfortable alert you can acknowledge and move on from. But the drowning is only the beginning. Because once your psyche realizes you're still not listening, it changes the dream. It stops making you the victim of the flood. It makes you responsible for someone else drowning instead. The second nightmare, failing to save. You know how this one goes. Someone needs you. Someone is in danger, slipping away, falling, crying out. And you are right there. You can see them. You reach, you run, you try, and it is never enough. Your hands pass through. The distance grows, they go under. And you stand there, helpless, as the person you were supposed to save disappears. You wake up feeling like a failure, like something is fundamentally broken in you. That guilt is the trap inside the trap. Because Freud documented something the dream doesn't show you. The person you couldn't save is almost never a stranger. It's the child you once were. The one handed an impossible mission, assigned the role of rescuer in a family system that needed saving, placed in charge of an emotional environment that no child should ever have to manage. The failure in the dream is not about them. It is about you, failing yourself, the way you've always failed yourself, by making other people's emotional survival more urgent than your own. Jung took this further into territory that is harder to dismiss. He identified what he called the savior complex, one of the most psychologically dangerous structures an empath can build. When your ego fuses with the savior archetype, you stop being a person, you become a function. Your identity depends on being needed, on being the one who understands, on being indispensable to people who have no intention of doing their own work. Jung's case files contain a devastating illustration. A patient dreamed for 15 years of failing to rescue drowning children. She woke in tears, convinced she was a terrible person. Through analysis, Jung discovered the children were all versions of herself. The 5-year-old who learned to read her mother's moods, the 12-year-old who became her father's emotional confidant, the 17-year-old who sacrificed her own future to keep the household stable. She wasn't failing to save children. She was watching her own development drown while she rescued everyone else. Jung noted that when she finally understood this, she experienced what he called appropriate grief. Only after that grief could integration begin. So there are 2 down, 2 dreams you may recognize, 2 warnings from your unconscious that something is deeply wrong. But here's what you need to understand about the pattern so far. The first dream makes you a victim. The second dream makes you a failure. Neither one shows you the truth yet. The third dream will, because the third dream shows you what's been following you this whole time. The third nightmare, being chased. You are running. You don't always know what's behind you. Sometimes you never see it, but you feel it. The certainty of pursuit. The specific terror of something that knows exactly where you are and will not stop. You run until your legs stop working, until the walls close in, until there is nowhere left to go. And when you wake, the fear doesn't dissolve the way normal fear does. It clings. Because some part of you just suspects that whatever was chasing you wasn't entirely outside of you. You're right. Freud understood the pursuer as your own repressed material, the rage you've swallowed for decades, the selfishness you've labeled as unacceptable, the cruelty you're capable of but have refused to acknowledge. You built an entire identity around being good, being understanding, being the one who doesn't harm, and in doing so you drove everything that didn't fit that image underground. What gets repressed doesn't disappear. It gains mass in the dark, and eventually it has to pursue you. Because integration is the only way out of the chase. Jung called this the shadow. He documented that empaths develop particularly dense shadows precisely because they've made goodness their whole personality structure. Everything incompatible with the empath identity gets exiled. Your capacity for manipulation, your occasional enjoyment of others' failures, your desire to be cruel to people who've hurt you, your wish that certain people would simply cease to exist in your life. Jung documented a case in 1923, a patient whose pursuer's face was always obscured. Through active imagination work, he had her stop running and turn around. When she saw the figure's face, she recognized herself, a cold, ruthlessly self-interested version of herself. Everything she'd spent her life not being. She initially experienced this as confirmation of her worst fear. But Jung's observation was different. The shadow wasn't her true self. It was the compensatory structure her psyche had built to balance her excessive identification with selflessness. She didn't need to become that figure. She needed to integrate its qualities in measured doses, learn to be appropriately selfish, set limits without apologizing, acknowledge when she simply didn't want to help. Within months of that integration, the chase dreams stopped. Now 3 nightmares are visible, 3 points of a map. And perhaps you've noticed something. Each dream has moved closer. The first dream happens to you. The second dream implicates your choices. The third dream reveals what's inside you. The fourth dream doesn't move at all, because in the fourth dream, you can't. The fourth nightmare, being trapped. The room has no doors, or the doors don't open, or you open them and find only walls. You search every surface, every corner. You know there must be a way out. There has to be. But there isn't. And the horror of this dream isn't the confinement. It's the dawning recognition that the cage is familiar, that some part of you has been here before, that some part of you never left. Freud interpreted this as the repression of autonomy, the accumulated weight of obligations, expectations, roles you never consciously agreed to, but somehow ended up performing your entire life. You feel trapped because you are trapped, not by anyone else's design, by your own. Jung's analysis names it precisely, ego imprisonment. The empath identity you've constructed has become a cell. You cannot say no without a wave of guilt. You cannot prioritize yourself without the voice that calls you selfish. You cannot stop being available without the creeping conviction that you've failed your purpose. The walls of the trap aren't circumstantial, they're architectural, built brick by brick from every time you chose to be needed over being whole. Jung called this an individuation crisis. Your psyche is showing you that the structure keeping you safe is also keeping you stunted. You have the key to this trap. You have always had the key, but using it means dismantling the identity that has defined you and facing the terrifying question of who you are without it. 4 dreams. If you've made it here and recognized yourself in all of them, the drowning, the failing, the chase, the walls, then you already know what the 5th one is. Some part of you has known since the beginning of this. But knowing and being ready are different things. Because the 5th dream is the one they all were building toward. The one your psyche has been trying to prepare you for through every prior nightmare. The 5th dream is the one where you die. The 5th nightmare, death. You don't always see it coming in the dream. Sometimes it's sudden. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's your death at the hands of something faceless. And sometimes the more disturbing version, you choose it. However it arrives, when you wake from this dream, it does not feel like relief the way some nightmares do. It feels like a transmission, like something that needed to be communicated to you from somewhere deep enough that ordinary language couldn't carry it. Freud interpreted death dreams as anxiety about loss of control, often tied to relational failure or helplessness. But Jung, in his clinical documentation of empaths specifically, saw something entirely different. He called these dreams announcements of necessary psychological death. Not metaphor, not symbol in the casual sense. An announcement. Your psyche preparing you for the death of who you currently are. The dissolution of the empath identity structure that has served you and imprisoned you simultaneously. In Jung's own confrontation with the unconscious, documented in the Red Book, he experienced recurring death dreams before his most profound transformation. He initially read them as warnings. Later, he understood. They were invitations. The death in this dream is not the end of you. It is the end of the construction you've been calling yourself. The version of you built to absorb, to rescue, to be available, to suppress, to chase peace by running from your own shadow. That version must die. Not metaphorically, psychologically, completely, without negotiation. Jung observed that empaths who resisted this death remained trapped in the nightmare cycle indefinitely. The dreams cycling endlessly, growing more intense, more urgent, more impossible to sleep through. Those who surrendered to the death, who allowed the ego structure to come apart, emerged with something Jung called psychological sovereignty. Not softness, not expanded compassion, sovereignty. The ability to perceive emotional frequencies without being consumed by them. The capacity to feel without being controlled by feeling. The freedom to choose, consciously and without guilt, whether to engage at all. The map is complete. 5 nightmares, 5 stages of a single emergency. Your unconscious has been broadcasting for years. You're drowning in emotional material that was never yours. You're failing at an impossible mission you were assigned before you could refuse it. You're being hunted by the parts of yourself you've refused to acknowledge. You're imprisoned in an identity you built for survival. And you are approaching, whether you know it or not, whether you're ready or not, the psychological death that precedes transformation. Jung's clinical observation was unambiguous. The empath who does not integrate the shadow will be devoured by it. First in dreams, then in waking life. These nightmares are not symptoms of your sensitivity. They are emergency dispatches from a part of you that has been screaming for a very long time. Which one visits you most often? Drop it in the comments, because the order in which these dreams dominate reveals which threshold your psyche is standing at right now. And that is not a small thing to know.